Shabbat Shalom again, everyone. And a special welcome to all of our guests who are here, and a very special welcome to Audrey's family and friends. You are the Ramah friends, I assume, sitting here? Yes? Yeah? Yeah. Where do you come from? You're from here and go to Ramah together? Okay. Yeah. You don't know this, but we're soulmates. So I've spoken probably enough already this morning, and have tried to confront the issue of the crossing of the sea and the meaning of the crossing. But I was thinking about something else in relation to the large picture of this morning's Parsha, which is a really, really important Parsha. And I was thinking about it in the following terms. Many of you here know that our congregation worked really hard the last few years and engaged hundreds and hundreds of people participating in the scribing of a new Torah. It's the Torah that we read from this morning. It was the Torah that walked around the congregation just now. It was our Eitz Chaim Torah project, a Tree of Life project. We entered the project in the beginning of COVID when things were really difficult and very hard, knowing that the Torah was certainly one of the things, perhaps the most important thing, that kept our community focused on each other and belonging to each other and to our tradition. The project was going to memorialize those who died during COVID. And the project also was going to celebrate all of us who, thank God, survived. So there was a scribe who came, a sofer came, he sat on the bima under a chuppah. Sitting there expressed our deep connection to Torah, our love for Torah. That Torah which is the document of our covenant with God. And after months and months of scribing, we then had a big celebration. Hundreds of people came together for that celebration. At the end of the day, however, for me, my memory of the Eitz Chaim Torah project will not be of the big celebration. At the end of the day, my memory contains hundreds of frames of images of our members, our elderly and our youngest children, who sat up on the bima with our sofer, one small group, one person, one couple, one family at a time, helping the sofer paint each letter with his quill, painted the crowns of the letters with great attention to detail. You know that our Torah is written by hand. It must be done with a quill and natural ink. It's painstaking and it's an arduous task. And then perhaps it is because of that very process that the attention to detail, that such great value is placed in that Torah, and the power and the longevity of Torah is realized. You know, there are extreme athletes who do incredible things with their bodies in order to achieve what seemed to be impossible feats. When I was a rabbinical student in New York, when I would take the subway, I would often buy the smaller newspaper, the easier one to hold in your hand when you sat on the subway, and I will admit it, I would buy the Daily News, the paragon of great journalism. Anyway, one time they did a story about an endurance runner who ran from the Golden Gate Bridge to the George Washington Bridge. Undoubtedly a gruesome task. Sometimes his pace was fast, other times it was slow. But he kept going and going and going, kind of like the Forrest Gump character in Tom Hanks' film. And when he arrived after months at the George Washington Bridge, there was a celebration that was waiting for him. And this is what stood out in that article. He was asked, what was the greatest challenge that you faced running across the country? And this man at the bridge, after this incredible accomplishment, he didn't say running through the Rockies or across deserts through the storms that he faced. No, he said, the greatest challenge were the pebbles in my shoes. They defined my experience. They created so much pain. I had to get over them, and they kept coming into my shoes. You see, little details often define the qualities of our life. So this Parshat B'Shalach, we read about this final moment of our liberation, the final victory over Paro. And we may think that the splitting of the sea was the most important part of that narrative, because, my God, it was incredible. I clearly remember being at Universal Studios years and years ago in Pasadena and sitting in that little train that brought Charleston Heston through the sea. The iconic moment in the film was huge. The technology that created it, which is so simple today, was intricate and detailed. In the Parsha, I do think that the great impact of the effect of a sea parting is the attention grabber. And all producers of stories or television extravaganzas, all productions work very hard to create an attention-grabbing moment. You could watch the Grammys tomorrow night, or next week, the Super Bowl and what happens at halftime. So I read the Parsha over and again, and like you, when I hear it, I think of the parting of the sea and the song that was sung. But then I began to think maybe there was something else that was a bit more important here, something that we may not want to even think about or talk about. Because although the liberation from Egyptian slavery was the cornerstone of Jewish survival and Jewish existence, the moment where we bound ourselves to God, where God made himself known not only to the Hebrew slaves, but to the Egyptians and the world. And there we experienced God's love and desire for a relationship. Maybe, just maybe, we should consider something else that was happening deep in the consciousness and the souls and the spirits of the people, and something that should speak to us even today. There's another part of the story that happens over and over and over again. And in that part of the story, there's no grandiosity at all. And this is it. The people so quickly forgot about the extraordinary miracles. In fact, from the very beginning after leaving Egypt, God has a concern that they will forget, and therefore he wants to take them in a different direction to enter into Eretz Yisrael. He was afraid that in spite of the plagues, they would forget him very quickly. And when they were faced with hardship, they would want to return. And what the people do after the splitting of the sea is they complain. And then they complain. And then they complain. They complain about the water. They complain about the food. You see, that's a very ancient Jewish tradition. And simply put, they complain about being away from that which was familiar, even the hostilities of Egypt. They imagined the food in Egypt was better, that conditions were easier, that they knew what they were going to do every day, and now they weren't so sure. Truth be told, people forget very easily. People forget the favors they receive, the goodness they receive. And we tend to live with an attitude that asks the question, what have you done for me lately? And so they very easily romanticize the experience of their past. The present is challenging. The future was unknown, and that was very difficult. The rabbis in a midrash have Moses asking the following question: did you forget all the miracles that God performed for you? Just think, Moses had to ask the people that question. Maybe they did. Because miracles are not so effective to inculcate a consciousness, an ongoing consciousness of God. A miracle may have bang for the buck, but there's no investment in the future with a miracle. In fact, in no time at all, the people didn't even believe him. Think about it. God created a perfect garden in the very beginning, and it didn't work. God sent a flood, and violence continued shortly after the rain stopped. The people redeemed from Egypt, they witnessed miracles and wonders, and the people act truculently. God gives a Torah, and the people ignore it. So maybe the Bible is trying to teach us something else here. Maybe, in fact, the Bible wants to say miracles don't work. While they're happening, people marvel at them, and then they're very quickly forgotten. So let me offer a counter-narrative, and it's not too exciting. The counter-narrative is the following: to create this religious community whose purpose is to reform human character, to control human desire. For violence, for control, for greed, it takes much more than special effects. To transform human character and human behavior doesn't require grandiose drama, but rather constant, gradual education, repetition of the stories, reinforcement of the learning, discipline, and a community with whom to share it. I think right now, by the way, that's the move that we're seeing right now amongst educators, people who are concerned about civil rights and about freedom and about justice regarding racism in this country. The desire, the need to learn the story, to learn the history in a critical fashion is absolutely necessary to reform the nation. Students need to learn those stories. They need to learn the critical facts. It's not to make anybody feel better or feel worse, but the learning, the repetition of events has the possibility of transforming behavior. The shift from the Bible to Rabbinic Judaism reflected a growing divine insight that the way we would mold a holy people will not be through external miracles, but it will be through inner transformation. And the transformation is accomplished through small, step-by-step progress, through sitting together and learning, through being together and acting. We need to gradually incorporate mitzvot into our lives, no matter who we are. We have to always see ourselves as having the potential to grow le'ela u'le'ela. We have to do it ourselves as adults in order to influence our children. And so step by step, we move towards making Shabbat more of a real experience in our lives. Community sharing more important. Song and prayer, study and love and joy has to be at the core. And none of these are miracles. We make a difference by doing small acts with tzedakah. You heard it this morning from Audrey, and the great importance that the TLC program has had on her life. There she learned that we care for those who are underserved and those who are without, and it became a part of her religious behavior. We look after those who are oppressed. We're concerned about immigrants and the homeless. And I also believe it's also done through very personal behaviors, like the food we eat. Kashrut isn't simply about what we put in our mouths, it's about the way we perceive the environment, the way we perceive all living things. So not only do we need to pray, to study, but we need to act in ways that transform the world, and sometimes those are really little things, but they make a difference. because they change our lives and they influence our families. So when we make prayer, study, Shabbat, social justice a regular part of our lives, we remake ourselves with a consciousness of that which is divine. And this is more difficult than splitting a sea. It involves an openness to changing our own behaviors, saying that where I'm at right now is not as comfortable as I should be. And we have to cultivate character continually. We have to be honest in reflecting upon ourselves and what we do and how we can grow our internal Jewish lives and what we do externally. I can do more. I can be more. I have more to give. We have to be able to say that. And I think that's what we try to do in this sacred community. We try to put God at the center, not through explosive events, but through the little things that we do each and every day of the week. And one last thought. It's a consideration for the moment, and those of you who have been here for years know that I've spoken about it often. You know, we live in an unbelievable place. It's so beautiful here. The places we live are really nice. We're close to the ocean. There are gorgeous trees, and the weather is magnificent most of the time. But being here is not enough if we're not capable of appreciating being here. We're in a wonderful synagogue, but that's not enough if we don't realize how extraordinary it is. We're in an incredible community. But it's not enough just to say it. We have to share responsibility for it. And yet we have to admit that like the Jews in the wilderness, who were liberated from bondage, we often complain, and we complain, and we complain also. We complain too much. And perhaps that's why our tradition has given us the means to express gratitude through simple brachot. And so we bless the day. We're grateful for the gifts we have received, whether we deserve them or they're part of God's grace. And when we put ourselves in that place, we can be much more appreciative. And when we're much more appreciative, we can experience that which is truly holy. We don't need to see the oceans split, but the heart and the mind needs to be open and remain open. And that takes will. It takes a desire on our part. The Baal Shem Tov once asked, it's a very familiar teaching, where's God? Expecting the answer to be God is everywhere, he said no. God is wherever we let him in. It's not in the grandiose. It's not in that moment. It's in the heart that appreciates this moment. It's in the mind that will always remain open to learn. And it's in the spirit that yearns and prays for a better world. Shabbat Shalom.